what do you think of you owning data? What do you think of you having the privacy of your digital footprint? Boom, 85%.
Due to ChatGPT, which is shifting towards applied AI and whatever.
An NFT into metaverse into in a new phase of AI with the ChatGPT. Google/Apple, right? Massive advancements, so meaning augmented reality. So we are at the right time.
How would I map that into what you just explained?
Why can we not build something digital?
What is the meaning of socialization?
The socialization is the nature of human being. That's what we want.
So where do you get the data sets from?
The chapter of our company is defined on focusing on students on campuses to create together digital graffitis. Okay, what is that, Tommaso? For a blue ocean strategy, meaning building truly a new category on how this next generation is socializing. And when you are with brilliant minds, you cannot teach, especially you cannot teach the future.
Welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Today's topic is about creating a new social content sharing platform to enable the co-creation of composable AI assets that users create, own, but also control. Tommaso and I met at the beautiful Stanford campus here, right in front of the world's famous Stanford Human Center Artificial Intelligence headquarters here in Palo Alto. Tommaso is a lot of things. He's a true serial entrepreneur. He's faculty at the University of California, Berkeley. He's a serial startup investor and entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a philanthropist. Thomas has built 4 tech startup companies so far from scratch, has 2 exits under his belt, and is working on his 5th. Full disclosure, I am an angel investor, as I do believe in Tommaso the person, but also his vision. Tommaso is passionate about sharing his lessons learned from over 2 decades of entrepreneurship and his tech expertise as a frequent global keynote speaker and as an advisor to some of Silicon Valley's most renowned startup accelerators such as the Google Launchpad, Draper University, and The Alchemist. What is Tommaso currently involved with? Well, Tommaso is a faculty at the UC Berkeley, where he teaches entrepreneurship on Web3, blockchain, AI, and previously robotics and autonomous systems. He also serves the role of a guest lecturer at Stanford University. Based in Silicon Valley, Tommaso serves on a board of advisors to some serial startups, as well as corporations seeking to evolve into the Web3 and metaverse world, which is what he's really, really good at. Now, Tommaso, believe it or not, speaks 7 languages and keynotes actually in 4 of them. He is the author of 2 books as well. I am your host, Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, a longtime entrepreneur myself here in Silicon Valley, and a corporate executive living here for over now 34 years, and the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. So with that, let's get to it. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the season number 2 AI Unplugged Without Borders podcast from the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Today I am sitting here in beautiful Palo Alto, right in front of the headquarters of Stanford High, the Human Center for Artificial Intelligence, and I have the honor today to welcome Tommaso, a good friend and absolute serial entrepreneur that I think we want to hear more about your mindset. I love your positivity. I always have, I have to say.
Thank you.
And with that in mind, let's talk about your experiences in Silicon Valley. Let's talk about your entrepreneurial and educational background. And I love to hear what gets you out of bed in the morning, why you keep doing what you are doing. And we all know it's not easy. So welcome again. And
so much,
why don't we start a little bit with you telling the audience, kind of with your own words, who you are, what drives you, what are you currently working on before we dive into the details, and see how it goes.
Awesome, outstanding. Well, first of all, thank you again. And thanks for the amazing setup. I mean, this is really for any entrepreneurs, I think on earth, right? It is a privilege to be at such a specific location, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Stanford, and then also the Center for Artificial Intelligence, where we have seen so many numerous brilliant minds and innovation coming right out of this building over here, right? So that's a really great pleasure. Well, talking about entrepreneurship, I've been in tech since 1998, actually, Thomas. And I started in the telco business, then I moved into the mobile business. And then in roughly around the dot-com burst, I decided maybe it might be the wrong time, right? But I decided right around the .com burst to start my first startup, right? And
which, by the way, historically speaking, was actually the right and best time to do that in a downturn to start a company.
I think that your statement is absolutely true. I think that starting in a downturn really makes the DNA and shapes the DNA of an entrepreneur tremendously, right?
Yeah.
Because you have literally only two outcomes. You either make it or you either die, right? And if you decide not to die, not literally to give up, right? Then you eventually, with a lot of resilience, the right team, and all the right ingredients that is needed as an entrepreneur, you'll make it. Yeah, and that's what happened to me during the .com burst. I decided to start my first company, right? And fast forwarded, I've done a couple. I have 2 exits. Actually, to be specifically, I launched 2 years ago my most recent venture called Phygtl. And I'm pretty confident that we will be double clicking on a second and the one or the other thing that we are doing, right? And I am also honored. I'm here in the Silicon Valley Bay Area for the last 13 years. By the way, for the listeners, right? Previously to that, I'm an Italian citizen who graduated in Germany. I lived good 2 decades of my life. And then on my quest and on my venture to seek Silicon Valley, I went a year through London because I thought, in Europe, London is the hub, which indeed is a very, very pulsing tech finance or finance tech hub, right? And then, life brought me here to the Bay Area. I've been involved with actually the other university on the other side of the Bay, which is UC Berkeley, for something over 5-6 years at the Sutarja Center, which is the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technologies. Started out teaching autonomous systems and robotics, moved then into the area of crypto, blockchain, Web3, and basically once a semester, I have the pleasure to learn with students.
Yeah.
And I used really consciously the verb learn because I do believe that, when you are with brilliant minds, you cannot teach, especially you cannot teach the future. But what you do is you experiment things together and then you together learn from the experiments and see what comes out of it, right? When I have a moment and I like to reflect and pause, I do like to write. In 2022, I released my second book called Navigating the Metaverse, published by Vyry, which, you could say we were lucky at the right time, right place. So we truly navigated was positively accepted by the US industry and maybe also global book. Second most read book in this topic of all things immersive, decentralized, the web, right? And the future of consumerization. Yeah. And that's about it in a nutshell. I'm part of a couple of advisory boards, but I think that's very common in the Bay Area.
Where in Germany did you study?
In Munich.
To Munich?
No, I was at the Bayerische Akademie for Werbung und Marketing. Well, I was like, do you want it with accent or without? So, which is the Bavarian digital advertisement university, if you so want, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love Munich. Before I came here, I lived in Munich.
I remember you telling me that, yeah.
I love that place.
Yeah, it's my second home or my main home, I could say.
So last year, I personally was working quite a bit on creating a DAO, the decentralized stuff with blockchain and stuff like that. And that's when we really got to know each other. And I took that brilliant class about the metaverse that you have online. Highly recommended, by the way, everybody check it out. But when I think about you, I think about somebody who has done multiple startups, multiple exits, and experts in the metaverse and blockchain. And now you're also focusing a lot on bringing AI into all of that knowledge. So tell us a little bit about your latest venture. If you by any chance pivoted because of external situations, please share with the audience, because I do believe startups need to hear how an experienced entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, comes up with new ideas. How do you find them? What drives you? But I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes you just run into a dead end and you need to pivot. And how do you walk yourself through that process before we go a little bit more deeper into what that technology is, the platform and such?
Phenomenal question, a lot to unpack, right? Let's start maybe on, and by the way, my brain is not on blockchain, so I might maybe forget the one or the other.
Yes,
forget the one or the other things. I think that, from an entrepreneurial perspective, you are always the consequence of what life and obviously, more business has presented you. And the way that you keep on living your life is by seeking clues in real life. Like you see kind of indications, signs, right, that indicate a very specific problem, right? So, the so-called opportunity recognition is nothing else than understanding what the status quo of the world is, right? And you kind of have a different perspective of how you start looking through life. Then you start kind of almost not chasing, but attracting challenges. And you keep on focusing on the challenge and say, what has changed in the macro economy? For instance, what behavior have changed, right? What legislations have changed? What next gen needs are changing? What technology evolution is changing? And as a matter of fact, if you want to recap, innovation is always the culmination, like the two main points matching with each other, which is, on one hand, you have technology advancements, right? Which is driven by brilliant minds, not just at university, but phenomenal minds from university that spin out maybe IP and new things, right? And then in parallel, you have your next generations coming up, like in this specific phase in 2024, we talk a lot about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, right? Which, will determine the future on how we shop and how we socialize in the future, right? And so with this new generation, you start basically associating attributes, right? And, we have seen, unlike, the Generation Y or Generation Boomers, right? That, Gen Z has a different way of truly defining friendship and socialization. That Gen Z is differently influenced on how they shop, right? And if you put this all in the brain of an entrepreneur over time, right, you start basically reflecting of what experiment can I drive, right? And this all to say that, 2 years ago, I started a kind of pleasurable experience that I had within, the UC Berkeley environment, being in contact with the next generation, to understand that, so realistic as it sounds, but Gen Z is really growing disenchanted from social media. And I want to almost add a rhetorical pause to it, because say, well, that's not true, because they love Snapchat and they love TikTok, as a matter of fact, right? And I say, absolutely, let's define love. What is it that they do, right? And so primarily what they do is they're being phenomenally entertained, but what they're not doing is contributing. So let's zoom out a second and let's catapult us back, what happened to the newspaper? What happened to television, right? These are our medias, right? Or let's go even further. What happened to, the 1.0 boom, right? Of which also is known as Web 1.0, right? Of else of the and the Yahoos, right? Which was more digital media, right? So digital media was all about, let's put something out there, let's make it available for users, let's make it searchable, right? And so there was an effort from a user perspective to search for something, and the web was, at the early, let's say, consumerization, at the beginning of the consumerization, maybe the first 10 years of the web into it, right? And that has slowly then evolved into the Web 2.0, which was, wait a second, we have all these user search, right? What if instead of you having the act and the action and the effort of searching, right? What if we present them, right? Through push notification. And how do we do push notification? Mobile phones. And you see that during this time, mobile phones, right? What if we present then information, right? And this then evolved into the third phase, right? Which is also known as Web 3, into, well, why should they just read and watch things if they can experience and be immersed in content? And this content that you are immersed, you now own the data, right? So that you have high level of privacy. And that's important to them, right? Statistics shown, I ran a statistic last year, actually 18 months ago, we asked 3,500 students across the United States, right? What they think about what if technology would allow them, right? And by the way, I had a series of those questions. What do you think about unique digital assets, also known as NFTs? What do you think of decentralized digital environment? But one question that stood out was, what do you think of you owning data? What do you think of you having the privacy of your digital footprint? Boom, 85%, absolutely.
Of course.
This is what we need, right? And, you ask me, well, Tommaso, how do you start? This is how I'm seeking always. I live my life, I seek clues, right? Then you start obviously aggregating those clues. And, long story short, I started understanding that there is an opportunity for a blue ocean strategy, meaning building truly a new category on how this next generation is socializing, all right? And actually would like also to add an additional claim. I believe that we truly have never digitally socialized. Well, Tommaso, this is not true. We have social media. Well, what if I say social media was more media than social?
So even I have to just really think hard. If somebody would ask me that question, what is the meaning of socialization within the digital? You know, I mean, video conferencing doesn't count.
I love it.
But NFTs, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of either.
Neither.
So what is the new definition?
Well,
now I'm curious.
I think that we have been undergoing, in my mind, the biggest experiments on Earth. And we were made believe that just because you click on a button that is called friends, you truly believe that we were friends, right? But when we are offline, I mean, we built the friendship the last 13 years. I remember when you still were at T-Mobile when we had the first conversation, right? So that basically, so the result of us meeting several times, right? So the fact that we were decategorized and called something like followers, the last time I looked it up, followers is a herd behavior associated mostly with one animal, which is a sheep, who is not known as being intelligent, right? Is this a pleasant thing? So social media truly became, I think intentionally, it missed one exit. I think it was intentionally going in the right direction of becoming social, but then they started too early to focus on how do we monetize that and started introducing advertisement, and advertisement become obviously, you know, the digital world of the ads, digital ads, right? And that basically created the animal of becoming media. So we were used/leveraged, right? As, okay, why don't we create user-generated content? So we believe in a future that socialization is what? The act of you with two or more people creating and doing something online with a purpose. So I give you an offline example. I give you an offline example. The two of us meet, you know, I'm Italian, very cliche, right? And we cook, right? I say, hey, I want to do a phenomenal carbonara, and I do a tiramisu, right? For those who are out there, if you don't know that dish, right? So and then you come and you say, you know what, I have a surprise for you. Here is the apron. Let's do it together. And you will be definitely leaving that place and say, that was not just Tommaso cooking, it was an experience.
Okay.
What if we do that digitally? Actually, I kept on asking myself, why can we not do that digitally? Why can we not build something digitally? So introducing what we are building what I call right now a creator platform, okay? We could call it a geospatial creator platform. We could call it a Web3 platform, but let's leave out all these buzzwords, right? It's a creator platform for next generation to socialize. And what do they socialize with? The intent and the main activity of socialization, in brackets, unlike in the past where you were to click on friends, you co-create together digitally. So imagine almost something like Pokémon Go meets Roblox, but not with the intent to play, but with the intent to meet like-minded peers in your vicinity. So our platform basically allows you to do a very simple step, the following. You take a picture of whatever you want, like you're doing nowadays. Pictures, by the way, you know, this next generation, the current generation, they take roughly between 17 and 25 pictures a day. The question is why? Pictures mean something. So what we do is we throw those pictures into our LLM, and that is our large visual models, and they say, hey, what do you interpret out of that? And could you create an engagement model, a storyline, if you so want, out of those pictures, right? I know that you are a marathon runner, and maybe you bought your new sneakers and your new jersey, and maybe your new bottle that you're running with, right? And you're super happy, right, to take a picture of. Why do you take this picture? Because you know that there are some like-minded around you, but you don't know that.
Okay.
Right? The system recognizes that within a short period, within a similar period of time, let's call it 24 hours, there were others that you don't know that also have the same interest. And the system basically, that's the reason why LLM takes us beyond the sight, beyond the brain, beyond what we understand, interprets and say, hey, there are two folks that both are in Palo Alto, both seem to have a similar affinity based on the pictures that we're taking. What if we engage them together, what we call as pals, or also in English kind of acquaintance, right? Not friends.
Yeah.
Because we're not friends.
We
just do something together, right? And so what we are undertaking is this experiment of connecting like-minded through the act of co-creation.
I see.
All right?
So if you then, let's take that example with the carbonara and tiramisu.
You like that, right?
Because they are two of my favorite dishes,
Right.
I have to admit. So I'm old-fashioned. So if you get me in the kitchen, and actually I did that over video during COVID.
Love it.
With my friend in Menlo Park, he's
All right.
in my running group, and
Okay.
he is Alberto, and Raquel,
Okay.
they're from Spain.
All right.
So we did paella. Over video the entire
it.
afternoon. Each side finished one bottle of red wine, and we
wow.
literally had the computer in my kitchen, and then we ate together as two families.
That is amazing.
That's the crazy thing. So I'm trying to map that into the physical world. There was the Zoom experience. How would I map that into what you just explained? Or is it that the younger generation, the Instagrammers out there, the Snapchats out there, they're already doing these kind of things, but they're not creating it as a group?
Well, a couple of things. So first of all, nobody ever believes that, there is space for social, right? I mean, the best example is when I did my very last startup, Snapchat had not even raised the A round, right? And so what we introduced were one of the first video messaging apps. And so when we introduced video, right, everybody was saying, oh, well, pictures, right? And we introduced a gamified way of socialization through stickers, right? Snapchat's got the A round, right? Boom, Snapchat came on the market, and everybody, okay, now it's over, it's social, right? Yeah. And then, Musical.ly was acquired, and then TikTok. So socialization is the nature of human being. That's what we want, right? But this socialization really limited to connections, and that's what I don't believe. Actually, let me take you into the next more profound assessments that we are doing here across the United States. We believe actually that this topic of socialization is very thought-provoking because you are kind of, anchored into this, oh, this is what I do. And then you need really to detach yourself and ask yourself the provoking question, what if? What if this crazy dude over there that talks about carbonara is actually right? What if you actually have the ability truly to define socialization through common interest in creating something? So what we are right now experimenting is geolocation is very important. So if we both are in Palo Alto, the probability of us doing something is much higher if we are detached, or remote or something, right? So the probability of us over time eventually meeting, right? I'm not saying the first time meeting is there, right? And our application through those pictures allowed you to create almost like, imagine kind of storybooks and storylines that we say, okay, today is the storyline about marathon, tomorrow is the storyline about cooking, tomorrow, right? And it presents you those storylines that are highly, Thomas, contextual. So our LLM always assesses on a daily basis, where does Thomas stand today based on the pictures? And what can I present to Thomas that maybe Thomas might be triggered and engages? And when you engage and interact with we call them, by the way, quest, right? Those quests have a mechanic that they allow you to go places and explore the world, right? And so we keep on training the LLM through visuals, so large visual models, right? So that it presents to you storylines. Now these storylines and these suggestions, they suggest to go places. Right? Mm-hmm. Similar to Pokémon Go, instead of Niantic, which is the founders and the company behind Pokémon Go, designing with a lot of engineers and a lot of designers, right? You as a user are the designer of your own story. But this is too complicated. No, wait, just by taking a picture. The rest is built through LLM.
So where do you get the data sets from? Or are you waiting for the users to sign up and then they feed into your LLM my daily pictures, my sneaker pictures, or?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The first chapter of our company is defined on focusing on student on campuses, okay? So we geofence the campuses, meaning literally geofence. And we're starting with 6 universities on the East Coast. It's UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara on the West Coast, obviously. And on the East Coast is Stony Brook, Carnegie Mellon, and we have University of Michigan. And then we empower certain student clubs to create together digital graffitis. Okay, what is that, Tommaso? So we have kind of invented what can you create together, and we went into art. And obviously everybody knows graffitis, right? What are graffitis? You need to have this God-given talent that, to do beautiful things, right?
Yeah.
Most of us are not. I mean, I don't have it, right? But I think most of us are kind of attracted to graffitis. What if technology can allow you to create graffitis digitally together with others? And those graffitis don't necessarily need to be on a wall, but they can be kind of almost like sculptures. Mm-hmm. So, and we built basically this first, what we call beachhead, this very laser sharp, very focused activity on you go on a quest with like-minded peer that the system introduces you. The quest is built up the pictures that you take. By the way, why post them on Snapchat and why post them on Instagram if now you can meet others and go on, right? Obviously, you can imagine that there is a layer of gamification with points, reward mechanisms.
Yeah.
right? And then the end result of it is those digital graffitis.
Okay.
And those digital graffitis, we convert them into augmented reality.
Okay.
And you imagine that they would be all around us, like the Pokémon Go. But again, built by the users,
By the whole community.
by the community.
Okay.
So meaning you are at Stanford here, soon you will be seeing Stanford that has those digital graffitis. And so you have two behaviors in this ecosystem, in this economy, in this, we call them world, by the way. I don't call it network, I don't call it social media, right? I call them worlds, digital worlds, right? In this world, you can be either the creator and participate on those quests, or you can say, I don't want to participate in those quests. And you can download the app, and through mobile phone applications, right? By the way, a very important technical advancement, speaking of clues, right? AR Core and AR Kit, Google/Apple, right? Massive advancement, so meaning augmented reality. So we are at the right time, right? So you can discover them through augmented reality, and you would only see things that matter to you. So if I'm not into sports or into carbonara for whatever reason, you wouldn't even see those digital graffitis around you, but you would then see those digital graffitis if you have kind of an affinity to that graffiti. And then you have these digital graffitis are decentralized. I didn't use the word blockchain or Web3, but yes, they are, right? And the reason why I didn't use it, it's purposely and consciously because we don't sell this to users as, this is blockchain, this is Web3. I don't believe in that. We believe in benefits. We say, hey, do you want this thing that you created with peers forever? Yes or no? Well, I would love to have it forever. Okay, cool, now we can eternalize it. And the user doesn't need to know how it's eternalized, right? You have basically almost like your catalog and you keep on eternalizing these things.
Maybe we stop here for a second,
Right.
because I still would like maybe a minute to dive deeper into the components that's required to actually have this vision and turn it into a product or a platform or a service. So maybe just for the developer guys, for the startups who have similar ideas, you explain very nicely the old world, what the future would look like, socialing and all of that. What are the components that you need to make this for real? What kind of people are required? And how do you find them as an entrepreneur where you have a great idea, but now you go from here to there?
This is maybe the most important question, right? We know that the last 2 years are very comparable to the dot-com burst, right? The investments have been tremendously hard from a startup perspective. We have seen tons and tons of stories about maybe, startups with first attempt, a startup founder with first attempt, giving up, pulling the plug.
I think we're still in the boom phase. We haven't seen the bust yet. We are still in the semi-hype boom phase due to ChatGPT, which is shifting towards applied AI and whatever. The bubble hasn't burst yet. And it won't burst as it happened 2001 or 2002? But the air goes a little out.
From a perspective of investments, we have seen the investments into startups, obviously, right? From VCs going down tremendously, right?
Yeah.
And we have seen also roughly 20% going down the last 2 years in terms of new funds creation. So you definitely see a very limited amount of capital distributed into startup. Does not really motivate the entrepreneurs want to ride a wave, right? I absolutely agree that we went from, an NFT into metaverse into in a new phase of AI with the ChatGPTs, right? And you asked me about, how do you start, right? The most important thing in a startup, and this is actually too simple to be fair, actually, what I'm stating here, is team, period. When I do courses and, call it teaching, entrepreneurship, and I pause on team, everybody say, okay, what's come next? It's almost like, okay, I understood, right? But you don't.
They don't internalize what that really
Exactly.
means.
You listen, but you have not internalized it, right? I don't believe in startup failing, Thomas. After 23 years of doing startup, series of major learnings, I don't call them failure, by the way. I only fail when I stop, right? That's my entire, so my life is the biggest journey, right, that I do. And then you have different chapters. So I never fail, I just learn. So meaning I never fall down, I always fall up, if it makes sense. Like I always, tumble up the ladder, right? Because, once you tumble up and then you look back and say, wow, I did actually 3 steps up, right? So all this to say that the wiser I became, the more mature I became in entrepreneurship, the more I consciously focused on the fact of how you create from the get-go startups, right? And at Phygtl, we have our virtue, which is the three biggest priorities. So priority number one is us, and I mean it. So we are, as of today, 30 plus. We have a massive advisory board, like roughly 8 advisory boards from Coca-Cola, Nike, Lego, senior vice presidents of Dior, like massive traction. We have some of the most renowned professor of artificial intelligence. Now we are adding a layer of professors in well-being, and I'll explain in a second, mental well-being. So remind me of that, because I think that might be, but going back is, it's really the team. I want to also throw in something that is super controversial here. I hope you guys are buckled up and sit, right? I don't believe in an A team. Oh, wait a second. What do you mean? We need an A team. Well, guess what? The person who is an A person is doing already his or her startup. So to get that person to join your startup is tremendously and highly impossible.
If the A is related to an individual,
But
I would argue that an A as a team, that's something to strive for.
The A is the face in my mind. I think that
Some of B players can be an A team. Is that correct?
I think that what you make out of your team becomes an A face. So meaning you take what comes, right? Obviously you need alignment in values, and,
of course,
right? That is the biggest thing, right? Alignment in vision, alignment in values, right? It's not even an interview process, it's like a get to know each other process of 4 or 5 steps. And then so value alignment, personality, traits. My main question is always, what's your biggest challenge that you had in life? Like, where do you stand in life, right? And so you then get to understand how long potentially this specific player, right? And then the question is, do you have money, yes or no? I think that is the fundamental question, right? I say, well, Tommaso, thank you, you're saying that because we don't have money. Well, startup is making out of nothing something. It is easy if you think top down, I have money and I allocate money, because then you go based on, requests and features, right? How do you get out of nothing? And so in order for you to make out of nothing something, you need to be leading with a very bold vision.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way,
to convince others to join and believe in it.
You used a verb that I don't agree politely. I don't think it's convincing. You enchant and attract. You don't convince. I think it's wrong convincing. You could convince people, but they don't are intrinsically then motivated. So you need to plant a seed and then say, this is what I do. Where do you stand in life and what do you want in life? And do we meet at the right time, like does the universe, the nature, the gods, depending on what you believe, align us for the right moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you basically attract people. And then you start attracting your first, your second, your third, and then you have famously what I call almost like, again, I'm talking about the phase before you get funded. That's the difference before, after you're funding, right? So getting to 10, 20 people, 15 people that maybe work part-time, 10 hours, right? Again, without funding.
Equity.
Right, based on equity, right?
Exactly.
Because you cannot do it on your own. So you need a team.
Yeah.
But team needs to make a living, or it needs to join a purpose. Right? And I think that it needs you a couple of attempts for you to really internalize that, and then inside out, enchanting, attracting, right? And yeah, I've been blessed, to be honest, Thomas, right? That even during this very tough times, we have been attracting massive, great talents. And we are actually now on a run where we say, we go all the way in. We dismiss and disregard the bad times. And we say, we know exactly what traction we want to have. We know exactly where we want to take the product to, right? Because it creates this inside-out dynamic of a company, right? Obviously, we have some initial funding now, right? It goes without saying, but we didn't start with the funding, right? So yeah, that is the most important thing. The second most important thing is, for as long as you treat your users as your user, I think you're going to fail. The user is your extended arm of what you're building, right? The community needs to be the extension of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it does not mean that the user decides what you do, but it's a collaboration, right? And once we start understanding that collaboration, it unlocks and it releases dopamine of you have accomplished something together. You say, oh yeah, this is logic. Okay, well, if it's logic and clear, why don't we do that? Right? So to say.
So for people who are not yet at these universities, campuses that you mentioned, and they are geo-fenced, by when do you think you have a product out that the public can use, can sign up for, subscribe for?
We have roughly 10,000 students in the United States on the wait list, over 500 universities already. We don't have pressure to roll out. right now. We are rolling out. I mean, well, Thomas, it doesn't make sense. Why don't you have pressure? We're not building this for investors. We truly believe that in order for you to build a blue ocean strategy and change from the ground up what we are doing behaviors, I know it's challenging, yes, but we bought into this. Like we wake up to do something challenging, right? We bought up to build from the ground up socialization across the physical digital dimension, right? So we know that we need to really understand the core loop mechanic and have the evidence of the core loop mechanic. And this is the phase we are in right now. So to answer your question, you can sign up, go on vyryworld.com, vy.world, right? Sign up. We'll release, one brain and one talent at a time. Okay. Right now, we are seeking co-conspirators. What is that? Co-conspirators are those who understand that we are pattern breakers, that we are doing something new, and they love the vision, and they see what we have, not out of context, but within the context. So, the famous books that is, your prototype sucks. Yeah, we are at this stage, but we are proud about it, right? And we seek those that say, oh, this is actually really cool vision. I like the fact of we together. I like the fact of moving away from I do, I like, I share, I create into we accomplish, we belong, we do, we in the future monetize, we influence, right? And is it an experiment? Yes, but what is not?
So for the people who are listening to this session, I will definitely make a mental note, that I'm going to re-invite you again in 6 to 9 to 12 months to see what the progress has been. There are probably lots of learnings, and then what the next steps are. In closing, tell me a little bit more about the reference that you just made about the wellness aspect. Because for me, in the digital domain, I have a teenage daughter, different behavior, Instagram, Snapchat, that's how she grew up. Wellness for me, mental wellness as well as physical, is super important. What did you mean by the wellness comment?
Like everybody talks about this statistic, Thomas, right? That the attempt of social media being social led actually, and that's the reason why I call it the biggest experiment, right? To massive anxiety and depression like we have never seen before. And people have never felt more alone. Like just saying that, why do we read just that? And why don't we take actions on that, right? So pause a second here and say, well, this is fact, right? So what are we doing? Now introducing obviously, and that's where LLM comes into play. LLM needs to be trained. Over the last 12, 18, 24 months, right? Primarily the LLMs have been trained based on data that we see in the web, right? But what happens to training data based on behavior outcomes that invoke positive mental well-being? What if we all put our brains together and make it actually a point and an effort to train the LLM to create engagement models that actually support us/the next generation? It's not about us, right? The next generation on doing things that are unleashing dopamine and the feeling of belonging, the feeling of accomplishments, right? So how can we reverse engineer those feelings, those aspects of adrenaline, those aspects of feeling well, and train with that purpose in mind, the LLM? So that's the reason why we actually revisited our entire board and say, well, now in the second stage of the company, this became bigger than just 20 people that we are. And that's the reason why we have Coca-Cola in our board, as I mentioned, Nike from an industry perspective, right? I mean, some of the largest, if not the largest consumer brands, like most recently Procter & Gamble joined, putting together now with the best brains AI professors, right? And AI well-being professors, because we're creating this movement supported by technology of what is the user needs to do, right? How can the user be experiencing the world, like truly experiencing immersively across all senses, right? The sight, the touch, the smell. Is this the long-term vision? Well, yes. But without a long-term vision, you don't have a short-term strategy, right?
I love that aspect, because even I noticed most recently, multiple times on TV, CNN and whoever, the wellness or the lack of it, and depression and loneliness and these things, even for elder generations, seems to be a huge issue right now that needs to be addressed.
Tremendous, right?
Anyway, time is up. I really appreciate the conversation. I learned a lot, as always.
The pleasure was mine, and you know what? I'll invite you on a carbonara.
Okay, I would love to do that. Thank you very much. And that is the session for today. And you will hear more of this in a few months, because I really want to keep an eye on this whole thing to get it a little bit more in my head and more tangible. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Thomas.
Thanks, everybody.